Live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for CEO Exclusive, brought to you by Anona Enterprises.
Good morning and welcome to CEO Exclusive, where we get emerging trends from CEOs and their most trusted advisors. I'm your host, Soyini Koch. And real estate is one of those things that's always of great interest to our CEO listeners. And so periodically, I love to have somebody on the show who's an expert in real estate. And so I'm delighted to welcome on today's show, James Pitts, president of Kellogg Partners, Commercial Real Estate. James, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Soyini.
So, James, what are the trends that are happening in real estate, commercial real estate in particular, that you think our CEO listeners need to be following right now?
Well, I'd say nationally, it's a really strong market. There's actually growing competition among landlords for tenants, and steadily rising vacancy rates are compressing effective rents. Tenants are actually opting for Class A office space and opening up vacancy in Class B. Right now, nationwide, we're at a 14.9% vacancy rate. Overall, asking rents have actually stopped increasing for now. And nationally, suburban rents are rising while CBD rates or central business district rates are flat or declining.
That's downtowns?
That's really office. So that's off. So that's downtown, that on a national basis.
Okay.
And when we talk about your CEOs, I'm assuming most of them are either in office space or industrial space. So I'll talk about those two trends. And I'll also talk about Atlanta as well.
Yeah. So I want to pause you here because you said something really interesting when we were preparing for the show. You said, all that's really great. And right. CEOs love to hear it, but you said it's empty calories. So, people love to talk about real estate and vacancies and prices and stuff like that. Why did you say that you thought that's empty calories for people who like to follow this stuff?
Well, so I could give you the macro trend, and I'll actually show you that for Atlanta. I'll give you the example of that. So on a macro basis, CBDs are actually dropping. That's Atlanta.
Downtowns.
Yeah. In Atlanta, it's actually flipped. So Midtown is the hottest market in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really depends on where you are in the country, what type of product you're looking at. Are you Class A, Class B? Are you suburban? Are you central business district? Are you, in the South and the North? And it just really depends on your market and what's going on in the dynamics of that market, supply, demand in that particular market. Are there active developers in that market that are delivering product? Is it a city that's revamping and reinventing itself like Atlanta with the Beltline, so that now you have an influx into the middle of the city? So I could give you macro trends, but overall for your business, it might be an empty calorie.
So on the other hand, I think part of the reason why there's so much interest in following real estate, even at the national level, is it's often a leading indicator for for how the economy is going to go.
It's actually a lagging indicator.
Sorry. Okay. Thanks for the correction.
So it typically lags by 6 to 12 months. So when you had the big recession that happened in 2008, real estate didn't really show the effects of that. Because when you think
about commercial real estate.
Commercial real estate.
Yeah, I was thinking
Yeah. So commercial real estate, which is where I play, is really a lagging indicator. And when you think about it, you've entered into a lease, and your lease does not roll over for 2 to 3 years to 5 years, or you bought a property. So really, it's a lagging indicator of the economy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So when the economy came back, it still took a minute for commercial real estate to recover.
So, a real estate researcher once laid this out for us. Where in the different cycles are the different types of real estate? Can you share that with us? So I know that like home building, for example, tends to be a leading indicator, and then like residential's, and then you have industrial, commercial,
right,
and retail. So where do they all shake out in terms of the economic cycle?
Well, so like for instance, right now Atlanta is is really in a peaking phase from a real estate perspective. And we'll just use Atlanta as a microcosm.
Yeah, half our listeners are from Atlanta anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So it's in a peaking phase. So right now, your rents have are actually starting to peak out. You have a great supply demand chain. And really, if you were seeking to buy something right now, and I have several clients who are seeking to buy, there's not a lot to buy. And it's really hard actually to even lease space in some places now, just because there's the lease space is going so fast. And if you were looking to buy something right now, you would really be looking to be a long-term ownership play, because you would be buying it at the top of the market. And so I actually wouldn't advise you to purchase something right now, just like I wouldn't have advised you to purchase something in 2008, 2007, 2008, right before the crash.
Well, yeah, 2008, at the end of 2008, it would have been great.
Yeah. So the time
After October 2008.
Exactly. So the time to buy is when there's been a dip in the marketplace and you can find value.
Okay. How do people know? What are they looking for? So what are some of the, the signs that it would be at a peak? 'Cause unless they just call somebody like you and say, where are we in the market? But
right. Well, I mean, so some people look at cap rates, and right now cap rates have been pretty stable as of Q1 to 2018, except for certain retail segments in the industrial sector. And there's just not I had a client call me from Detroit and said, I'm looking for some Class A office space, and I did a search, and there were like two buildings for sale that were Class A office space in Atlanta. And you just really look at what's available in the marketplace, and you start to look at the trend of how the price per square foot that things are selling. And right now we're at a peak phase.
Mm-hmm. So then the question becomes, and I know that people hate, you may hate this question, but I'm asking anyway.
I'll tell you if I do.
Okay. Based on your gut, I know that you can't predict the future, but based on your gut and based on your experience of having gone through cycles, how long do you expect the peak to last?
If I knew that, I wouldn't be here.
Which is why I said people hate to answer
here's the thing. So real estate does go in cycles, and there will be, and so what happens is that developers will 75% of all the deliveries right now of office space in Metro Atlanta are in Midtown. So at some point, Midtown will be overbuilt, even though it's so hot right now. And then you will have too much vacancy, and then suddenly, there will be a decline. Whether or not that's independent of what's going on in the market. I was listening to a story yesterday about the impact that the tariffs have had on a business in South Carolina that makes that assembles TVs for Walmart, and they're going out of business. So we're at the 10th year of economic expansion, and some economists are saying that may slow down in the next couple of years, because who knows if it will just continue to go. So you have the macroeconomic trends that affect business, and then you also have what real estate developers are doing in the marketplace when they're delivering product into the marketplace, and at some point you get overbuilt, and now there's no one to lease it, and so that begins to drive rents down, which if you drive rents down, drives prices down.
Mm-hmm. So if all of that may be more or less academic for the CEOs listening to the show, what do you think is useful for them to pay attention to? If they're not in the market for commercial real estate, maybe this conversation in and of itself is not all that impactful to them.
So when so the macro trends, that's one thing, and that's one thing to keep your eye on if you're in the market to lease or purchase a building. I'd say the bigger piece is to really understand how real estate impacts your business. So as you know, I used to work for Jones Lang LaSalle, and I've done work for corporate Fortune 500 companies, and still continue to do that with our firm. But what you find is that real estate is your second highest cost after people for most businesses. And I'd say that middle market companies or mid-sized companies, they're in a donut hole. They have the greatest risk around real estate. And I say that because if you're a startup, you're trying to survive your first real estate decision. Once you get to be a big Fortune 500 company, you have a head of real estate who's now looking to make your real estate portfolio efficient.
Mm-hmm. But it's their full-time job to watch real estate.
But a middle market company does not have a person in place typically that's responsible for looking at real estate, which is their second largest cost. And real estate really is a snapshot of what's going on with your business today that you're signing up for the next 3 to 10 years if you're leasing, or if you're purchasing even longer. So you can make a decision about real estate, either a lease or a purchase today. And if your business is growing and agile as a mid-sized company, and your real estate becomes misaligned with where the trajectory of your business, now you actually could have an issue with, like retention of people, attracting talent. Can you I had a client that actually outgrew their space, and they could not deliver their services and products to their clients because they just ran out of space, and they didn't have leverage with their landlord. So there's a lot that your real estate can make possible And there's also a lot that your real estate can cause pain for your business if it's not thoughtful, if there's not thoughtful consideration given to how you enter into your real estate solution.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of those strategic considerations? You mentioned a few of them, like, how quickly you're growing and trying to anticipate what your space needs are going to be over the entire life of your lease. But what are some of the other considerations that you think are important?
Well, and I'll say this too, is that, when you think about it, people who are typically dealing with real estate only deal with that once every few years. It's not what they do. It's not their core business. So just thinking strategically about your real estate versus I have to get this or what I like about it or the certain look of it, really standing back and saying, how does this fit my business? How does this affect my people? How does this affect my customers? How does this affect my operations? How does this, as you and I have talked about, affect my culture? Because space is a huge determinant of culture. Those are a lot of strategic considerations that they need to think about before they get into location, or even cost.
So pause here, because one of the things I've noticed is a lot of people are making big changes to their floor plan or their space in this in an effort to basically attract millennials, right?
Correct.
So they say that it's about culture, but bottom line, it's a lot of it's being driven by the desire to attract millennials and change the look and feel of the office. Intuitively, some of that feels a little trendy to me, that we may look back in a few years and think of this as the corporate version of wearing bell bottoms, like the whole bar in the
I resemble that remark. I used to wear bell bottoms.
the bar in the break room is going to be so dated that people will be like, what are you thinking? So
right.
How much do you think of this is really meaningful, and how much of it is just we'll look back, at all the little toys and stuff that they have, for example, in this office. I'm like, give me a break. Nobody's ridden the bicycle that's in this office for the entire 8 months that we've been here. What the hell?
Well, so I can say that, the pendulum can always swing far, but it's probably somewhere in between, in the middle of that. So we had a client that had a very traditional, actually about $100 million a year enterprise, had a very traditional headquarters, offices on the outside, tons of offices, really ugly cubes, really dark. People actually hated to go to work there. The CEO said that when I'm trying to hire someone, that I will not bring them to our office first. I'll meet them elsewhere, because if they see our office, they will not work here. We took them from that space, talked to them about the culture that they wanted to deliver, who needed to work next to who needed to collaborate, because it was really a Frankenstein's monster of, like, people just sat where they sat because that's where they sat, but you never sat next to the person you needed to actually sit next to work with. And took a while. We worked with architects, worked with space planners, but the new building and the new space is light, open, and airy, has collaboration areas, touchdown offices for people who come in that don't normally work there, or now they actually have a lot of people who work from home. And so they really work to say, what is our culture? How do we have people be most effective? Some people shouldn't come in every day. And the CEO, after we got done, said, I can't believe the effect that the space has had on our culture. She said, people want to come to work now. They stay later. They dress better. They're happier. She said, people are talking to each other more. She said, our entire culture has changed just because we put our offices on the interior and opened up the place and let people get light and let them see one another. Before, you could never see anyone you work with. And she said, it has completely changed us. So it does matter. And sometimes you can go to extremes and maybe have a trapeze in your office that you will wonder about someday. Or, I think people back in the days used to have bars in their offices and drink, like madmen, and drink their alcohol. But maybe that's not the way to go.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shift the conversation a little bit. I would love to talk with you about Kellogg Partners and kind of your history and how you're building a great team. So listeners, we're talking to James Pitts, who's the president and founder of Kellogg Partners Commercial Real Estate. So I'm very intrigued about we've been talking about the cycle, and real estate was, of course, really, really hard hit by the recession.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So how did you pivot during the recession, and how are you continuing to build and maybe head off and prepare yourself for the next downturn, which you said everybody's kind of looking for in the next couple of years?
Well, so when the recession came, a lot of our clients, the tenant rep business where we represent tenants to find space, people just didn't want to do anything and they just wanted to renew where they were. So we did a lot of work where we actually downsized companies because they were laying people off. We also, we were called by Lehman Brothers, and they asked us to sell REO properties. And so we actually picked up Lehman Brothers and another bank, and we spent a lot of the recession selling foreclosures for banks, because those businesses went out of business. And, and then it was actually a hard market to sell into. So you actually had a lot of people that with money who were sitting on cash came out and bought properties at a discount. And so that was one of the ways that we survived. And I can tell you a lot of my colleagues that I from the real estate industry didn't survive that. They left and went and did something else. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what we did is we took advantage of the recession by selling the assets that were made available by that.
Mm. And what are you thinking about when the next downturn comes?
Right now, so our main business is representing business owners and being their strategic advisor on real estate. We get paid a commission, but we really sit down and understand their business, and we work with them to figure out how their real estate needs to align with their business. We're actually starting a practice now where we're talking to private equity firms. I have a phone call later today, and I have built a small team, former executives from Fortune 500 companies who that was their job, to do corporate real estate. And we're going to talk with private equity and mid-sized companies about, okay, you don't have anyone who manages your real estate, so why don't we bring in that expertise on a as needed basis to give you the advice of someone who's done this for a large portfolio? Because when you think about it, at the end of the day, everyone's trying to improve their EBITDA. So, and that if you're trying to exit, the higher your EBITDA is, the higher your exit value.
Mm-hmm. And certainly if real estate is the second cost after people on your da-da-da-da-da.
And if you can peel that out.
Yeah, if you can save them, 10 whatever the percent, then
we're putting money in their pocket.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there'll always be a need to save people money and to make them more profitable and successful. So that's that may not be around transactions. That just may be straight consulting.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So we were having listeners. I'm going to ask you what's new and exciting that's happening at Kellogg Partners, and I would love if you would share some of the work that you're doing at Kennesaw State.
Oh wow. Okay. You want me to start with Kellogg?
Whichever.
Well, we also do a lot of work for Georgia Economic Development. So we help inbound foreign companies come in. We're working with a couple of South Korean manufacturers. We just helped a company from Italy. And so those are always really interesting assignments, with the cultural difference and just working with those large organizations. So that's been really exciting. And but when you ask me about KSU, now you're starting to get into my passion. I'm on the board of KSU's Entrepreneurship Center. They have the first entrepreneurship major in the state. And part of what they do, they have a nonprofit that they're affiliated with that trains K through 12 educators to put entrepreneurship into their curriculum. So it's not a club, it's not after school, but it's a part of what kids are taught every day. So you're teaching kids to be creative problem solvers and innovators. And quite frankly, the training that we deliver, which we've trained over 3,000 educators over the last 30 years, is to teach teachers to be innovators in the classroom and not be constrained by the curriculum and all the, basically every time there's a new president, a new administration, the goalposts get changed and teachers get frustrated with that. And I can say that because my grandfather was a principal for 60 years of K through 12. My dad taught for 35 years and my mother taught for 25. And my wife used to be a Montessori teacher. So I really have that in my DNA. And so here in Atlanta, when you think about it, or in Georgia, as we talked about before the show, Georgia was ranked number 2, I believe, in the country as best place to do business. This year, they were ranked 7th. And a story that I heard on the news was when the governor mentioned that K through 12 education was one of the reasons that our ranking was lowered. So when you think about it, Georgia could probably stand to improve our educational system. So how do we do that? I think it's by teaching teachers to be innovators in the classroom and giving students a reason, a why to learn and to be excited about learning, and to teach them to be problem solvers. And just think about that. If young people have become social entrepreneurs, business entrepreneurs, they create jobs, they become entrepreneurs, what does that look like in Atlanta if we can invest in our educational system and put entrepreneurship into the water that our kids drink? And so with KSU, we have an initiative right now with Cobb County. We're actually talking to the Cobb Chamber about making entrepreneurship curriculum available to all 68 of the elementary schools in Cobb County, which would be about 80,000 to 100,000 kids. And what would Atlanta look like in 10, 15, 20 years if our children grew up?
If we had 80,000 new entrepreneurs.
What would that look like?
Wow.
And imagine if you could actually have Metro Atlanta take that on. What would that look like if
do the kids actually start businesses?
The kids actually start businesses. Young man at Brookwood High School, and I got to call out to Cindy Quinlan and Angie McLean. Those are the two educators at Brookwood. Cindy was the 2016 National Teacher of the Year for her work. Young man there, my understanding is he's already made $200,000 in profit in the last 2 years in his actual business. There was a young man that was 16 years old that I met 2 years ago, and we're sitting there talking, and he's telling me that he's been in business for 2 years. And he's very serious with me. And I said, well, what's your business? He said, I have a landscape business. I said, well, okay, cool. You probably have a few yards. He said, no, I have 50 yards. He said, I'm about to take over 20 from one of my competitors. I have a 1099 adult employee who works for me, and I'm about to hire another 1099 adult employee. And I need to get this other guy trained to do the chemicals, and I need to buy a new truck. And I'm thinking about going from an LLC to an S Corp. And I'm thinking, I'm like, wow, this kid's 16, he's got HR issues. And I'm just like, wow, at 16, I was just trying to get a job at a hamburger joint.
I was working at the Kroger up the street, and
Exactly.
I lasted about a day.
And this young man, we actually had to talk him in his business got so big this past year, we had to talk him into staying in high school because he needed to get out of school to manage it. So he's in the Move On When Ready program. And what they're doing is amazing, and really, it's a K through 12 program where the Brookwood Elementary feeds into Cruz Middle School, which then feeds into Brookwood High School. And the principal of the elementary school said that it has been the most transformative program they've ever done. She would train all of her teachers in it. That kids are excited to come to school, teachers are excited to teach. When have you ever heard that about education, right? And she said, we have kids who had behavioral problems, kids who were getting into fights. She said all of that has just dramatically reduced. We had absenteeism is way down. And I'm not saying it's a panacea. And they also partner with the, I think it's Snellville's chamber, and they do a Shark Tank, and $10,000 have been awarded to actual businesses that come out of this program to launch their businesses. But these kids walk up, and when you talk about soft skills as an employer, these kids walk up and they tell you in 30 seconds, this is who I am. This is my business. Here's why you should buy my business or services. And they lean in and talk with you. And I don't see that with some adults.
Mm-hmm.
And you have these kids with these great soft skills that they're learning from entrepreneurship, and it's amazing. So that's something that's my unpaid internship that I take on, is how do we transform education starting in Metro Atlanta, take it to Georgia. And then quite frankly, when you think about it, we're training kids for jobs that don't exist today.
Mm-hmm. That's where the entrepreneurship is going to make such a big difference, because there's 73 million jobs that are going to get sucked out of the economy by automation. So what are those people going to do? And
you hear those teachers at Brookwood talk a lot about how do you pivot? How do you pivot? And they teach kids to pivot. And so we need a world where young people know how to pivot, because the world is changing rapidly. And, there's global forces, there's technology, there's automation coming, and So, and as the environment changes, I think that it's going to change, the way people work as well.
Mm-hmm. And the thing that I think is so exciting about this is instead of trying to create jobs for people, we teach people how to create their own jobs.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, I took the Georgia Department of Education and a lot of educators and business people to see the kids at the Brookwood Elementary School. And one of the teacher asked one of the third graders, "Who am I to you?" And she said, and the child responded, "You're my investor. When I need materials to make my products, I come to you, and you invest in me." One of the entrepreneurs that was standing next to me said, "We were just working with a young man in college that had a startup, and we were having trouble having them understand that if we made an investment, what that meant. And they were afraid to allow us to invest because of loss of control. If that college person had actually understood at this level, at the third grade it does, we wouldn't have had that conversation. Like they just saw it as another form of capital versus like, what does that mean?" And I took I had a professor of entrepreneurship that came, and she looked and she said, "Wow, these kids are talking about branding, cost of goods, margins in third grade." And she was like, I have kids in college that don't understand business at the level or entrepreneurship at the level that these third graders do. And they are amazing.
Awesome. Very good. Well, if people want to find out more about anything that they've heard, James, how can they do that?
They can go to www.kellogg-partners.com. That's our website. And you can find my contact information there. And I'd love to hear from you.
What about the entrepreneurship program?
Oh, the entrepreneurship program. Call me about that as well. If you are a business that would like to be involved in either supporting and basically helping to train teachers to bring entrepreneurship to our education here in Georgia or around the country, please reach out to me. If you're local and you'd like to get involved in, say, mentorship or Shark Tank days with these kids, please reach out to me as well.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So once again, we're talking to James Pitts from Kellogg Partners Commercial Real Estate. You've been listening to CEO Exclusive Radio. I'm your host, Soyini Koch, and I hope you have a profitable, productive, and very prosperous week. Thanks.